I stopped listening because what I wanted to hear you talk about was Syria, because we are in deep, deep trouble. By the way, let me just, where's your book? The judge is the author of Theodore and Woodrow, How Two American Presidents Destroyed Constitutional Freedom.
You inspired me to write that book. You know I am
Seriously?
a graduate of a university of which Woodrow Wilson was once the president. So I was raised
Did you know how bad he was?
No. And even though we had great professors there, some of whom studied under him when they were students there,
wow,
they idolized him, and we were raised in that. Listen, I was always a critical thinker. I didn't buy everything they taught us, but I did not realize the damage he did to the Constitution until listening to you and then doing independent research for the book.
And once you know about these two guys,
a Republican and a Democrat,
right,
really consistent with what you were just saying.
It's exactly what's happening.
History's repeating itself.
Yes.
This stuff, these two who mocked the Constitution, who believed it didn't mean what it said, who believed they could use executive power to right any wrong, regulate any behavior, and tax any event. It happened 100 years ago. We see it being repeated today, 100 years later.
Okay, so here we have, I want to get back to the events of the day, but let me just focus on this. Theodore Roosevelt, I was always confused by, because I liked some of the stuff, and then you'd read other things, you'd be like, well, where does that come from? But he really he was a precursor. He learned this in New York when New York was completely out of control. Nobody could control it, so it needed a strong man to be able to, you know, look, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to go around some of these rules here, but we're going to get it done for the people of New York.
He thought he could behave as president the same way he behaved as police commissioner in the city of New York. As police commissioner, he tamed an unruly city in an area in which it was in an era in which it was being unified politically, and it needed a strong man to do it. But the Constitution did not authorize him to do the same things from the White House as he did from his office as police commissioner.
And this is why crisis always leads to progressivism, because they can make the case, like last night, the president, oh, it's the children. It's the children. We've got a crisis and the children. And so it plays on people's fears. It plays on people's hearts. And all of a sudden you're like, well, no, forget about that, because we've got to take care of this.
In your much too kind and overly generous introduction of me, you addressed authoritarianism versus libertarianism. That has been the battle of the ages. It was fought in that era, and it will now be fought again today.
Who wins?
When the people are afraid, they opt for safety. They opt for Big Brother comfortably keeping them in his arms, forgetting that he also takes freedom from them, and when the reason for the embrace of safety goes away, the freedom does not come back. It takes courageous individuals who simply want to be left alone, who want to raise their families and run their businesses and run their financial lives free from immoral, unconstitutional intrusion by the government. It takes people like that to stand up in a time of crisis.
So let me take you to the heart first. Before I take you up here, let me take you to the heart, because I know really good people. And I addressed this last night, but I don't think it got a really good, satisfying answer. No, really good people who believe in what I believe, but the children always work. Judge, Syria, the children that have been gassed, the children that have been killed. What makes America different is we are the nation that helps the weak. We're the ones that stand up to the bullies. If we don't stand up to the bullies, no one will.
It's a great argument that appeals to a lot of people's hearts. You talk about heart, typically Beckian, astute, zeroing in on the issue. It appeals to people's hearts rather than their heads. If it were to appeal to people's heads, the argument would be like this. The linchpin for American involvement in a foreign war is not revulsion at what's happening. The linchpin for American involvement in a foreign war is, will our freedom and security be affected if we don't get involved? Answer, no. How could we possibly be affected by a war 6,700 miles from here?
So then let me, because this is what somebody threw up in my face the other day. And with that understanding, you win the argument. Oh, so you wouldn't have gone and helped the people in Germany?
Well, we were attacked by Japan. and Japan was an ally of Germany, and Germany declared war on us. And if we didn't fight in Germany, we'd be fighting in Baltimore.
Right. But beyond that, I mean, even if they didn't attack us, Churchill was begging us. Churchill, what turned Roosevelt was Churchill wrote to Roosevelt and said, if you don't act now, our Navy is going to be gone, and it will fly a swastika flag and it'll be on your shore.
I promise to be very brief on this. There are 4 circumstances under which the American military can legally get involved in a foreign war. This is based on the treaties we've signed and the body of international law to which we agree. One is when we've been attacked. Hasn't happened. We haven't been attacked by Syria. The other is when we are about to be attacked. When the enemy's at the gates, we don't have to wait for them to fire the first bullet. When an attack is imminent from the other country. Not the case with Syria. The third is when we've been invited into the country of an ally that's been attacked. This is the Churchill example. Doesn't apply for Syria. The fourth is when a country has violated an international norm to which it has agreed, and the UN has authorized us to do it.
Syria hasn't done that.
Precisely. The UN could do whatever it wants. Syria didn't sign the treaty against chemical weapons.
So then let me...
Who's used chemical weapons on their own people?
Saddam Hussein.
How far are we from Waco, Texas? Where federal agents used chemical weapons to murder 76 Americans in 1993 in the Clinton administration? Can you imagine if China or Russia wanted to bomb us to punish us for what we did at the time? Come on, where are we going with this?
Okay. So let me take you to the next logical question, which is, well, wait a minute. If those 4 don't fit, then you would be in violation of the Constitution if you would do it. Beyond in violation of us being able to do this, international law and our Constitution, here it is. I can't believe the audacity of this guy to tell us that we have to go to war and help Al-Qaeda on the eve of not only September 11th, but also Benghazi. And hang on. And so what I want to ask you is, isn't that aiding and abetting? Isn't that treason? Answer when we come back. Just a second. Judge and I are just sitting here having a conversation about the craziness of America and what we're facing now. Let me go back to the question we had just before the break, and that is, I know common sense, but I don't necessarily know constitutional law and international law. Common sense tells me when you are asked to go into a war with your sworn enemy
on the side of
your side,
right,
that is the definition, common sense, of aiding and abetting your enemy.
There's only one crime defined in the Constitution, it's treason. The framers did that because the kings of England used to charge their political opponents who disagreed with them with treason. So they made it very clear. Providing aid and comfort to the enemy.
Explain what that means. Yeah, what's the narrow definition
Well,
of that?
Tokyo Rose was convicted of providing aid and comfort with words, but in the modern era, it would be more than words. It would be providing material assistance to an organization that is waging war or a state that is waging war against you. Now, the government prosecutes people for providing material assistance to terrorist organizations. That's life in prison. How could the government itself provide material assistance to a terrorist organization? What am I talking about? Al-Qaeda is fighting with others to take over the government of Syria.
They would make the case that, well, that's just one faction and they're not all connected, and so we're not helping them. We're just please, Judge, we're just helping the good guys.
When Bashar al-Assad is removed from office, they're not going to take a vote to decide who replaces him. Al-Qaeda will kill its allies that helped them overtake Bashar al-Assad in Syria so that Al-Qaeda, can run the government. And if we do anything to help Al-Qaeda by harming Bashar al-Assad, by weakening him, by degrading him, by leveling the playing field of the battlefield, as John McCain said, that will be the moral equivalent of providing aid and comfort to the enemy. That is known as treason. And if we bomb a country, if we enter the country militarily Absent those four conditions we just talked about, the president could be charged with a war crime for which there is no statute of limitations. And when he leaves office, he will not be able to travel to parts of the world that will recognize the charge against him. Example, Donald Rumsfeld today cannot travel to the EU because he's been charged in Spain with war crimes. And the whole EU, the European Union, recognizes Spain's charge and will enforce Spain's arrest warrant. That could happen to Barack Obama.
Well, it would cut down on his vacation expenses quite a bit.
And they are very expensive.
Yeah, they are very expensive. All right, so I said this on the air today, that I think the guy is committing treason. If he does it, he's committing treason. And I know the Constitution, was it 2 or 3 witnesses you have to have for treason?
2 witnesses to the same overt act.
Right.
You have 200 million
that's
witnesses
what I said.
because of what he said last night on
That's
air.
what I said. I mean, honestly, I don't even know what the rating. Tiffany, what was the ratings last night for his speech? I'll bet you it was 30 million people.
I'm
but
sure
you have 30 million people that watched him do it.
This is a president disdainful of international law because it frustrates him, contemptuous of the Constitution because if it's followed, it will confine him. He just simply doesn't care who he decides to kill, who he decides to attack. This is a president whose attorney general said, don't worry, the president wrote rules to govern himself when he decides which Americans to kill. No American president has ever publicly stated that, Lincoln aside, it was a civil war on our territory, that he could decide which Americans to kill. Do you think he would sweat for a moment when deciding which Syrians to kill? Of course not.
I had a liberal friend of mine, longtime liberal friend of mine.
Both have liberal friends.
Yeah, I know. Who I really respect. If you're liberal, you're liberal. If you're progressive, I got a problem with you. But liberal and progressive are different, because John McCain, John Boehner, they're conservatives and progressive.
They would not be happy with the conversation that we're having now.
No, I know that.
And they're not happy with the trends in the Republican Party because they're on the short end of that.
Oh, I know that. And I think this is fantastic. But none of these guys would have the conversation that I had with my liberal friend that they brought up. They said, you know, Glenn, if it were reversed, if you would have had a Republican do all this, our side, we would have impeached him by now.
Probably. Look, we learned just 2 days ago that the FISA court ordered the NSA to dial back its spying in the Bush administration. And the Obama administration sent Justice Department lawyers into the FISA court to get that dialing back undone, without getting too specific into the weeds because it's very technical. As a result of undoing the dialing back, as a result of what the Obama Justice Department lawyers persuaded the FISA court to do, the NSA now freely admits that it listens to every phone call made on every telephone, landline, or cell.
The president has said that's not true.
And reads every email and every text made in or passing through or originating from the United States.
And beyond that, keeps it for a period of time.
Yes, they now keep it for over 6 years. Back to your question. And you and I have never hesitated to criticize the Bush administration when we felt it violated the Constitution. Do you think George Bush would have undergone an impeachment had he done this?
Oh, yeah. So, would you press, if he strikes, would you press for treason? And would you press for, do you believe we should impeach him?
Yes, I believe we should impeach him for the NSA spying alone. It is the most massive, organized, systematic violation of expressly articulated constitutional freedoms in the history of the United States, again, putting aside the Civil War era. Treason would be more difficult. Why? Because a treason charge would have to be brought by a federal prosecutor, which he controls. At some point, he's not going to be the president of the United States. At some point, someone else will be. And that person's prosecutors could seek a charge of treason against the president. I don't think they would, because there's this habit of protecting your predecessor so that your successor will protect you.